just in case he's
Morning, we're learning Tractate Pesachim, Daf Lamed Hamud Aleph. Still in the second chapter, name called Shah. It's the name of the chapter. Elam Malo. Elam Malo is the beginning of the page. Rather than you must say that the bite to discuss is not a biblical law, but a stringency imposed by the rabbis upon this water, by which they demanded that the vessel be filled directly from a spring, and not, when it comes to mechatos, it shouldn't be filled from one vessel filling another vessel, rather directly from the spring. Achinami malo, likewise here regarding tamei tuuma that became tameh, that was replanted, the rabbis imposed the stringency upon it. It is therefore will not become fully toher through being planted in the ground. So the Baita cites a second Baita that gives a biblical example of stringency regarding holy things. We also learned in the Mishnah, who on the seventh day of his waiting period immersed himself and emerged from the mikvah, may partake of Meiser. If the sun already went down, he may even partake of teruma. So the first step that he can do is to eat Meiser. The second step, once it's already sunset, after he went to mikvah and its time is up, he can go to and he can start eating Meiser. Once it's sunset, he can start eating teruma. Gemara says, "B'teruma ein v'kodshim loy." Yes, he can eat teruma. What about kodshim? That with regard to eating kodshim, no, he may not partake of it, but must abstain until bringing his offering. So that's mechusar kippurim. Mechusar kippurim is that he went to the mikvah and waited for the night, but he didn't bring yet his korban. So as long as he didn't bring his korban, he cannot eat kodshim. He can eat teruma and meiser, but not kodshim. Mai tohu. But why may he eat kodshim? He's tohu. Ela malo. Rather, it is evident that it's a stringency that the rabbis impose in regards to kodshim. Achanam, likewise here, regarding tuma, it is subject to rabbinically imposed stringency, and thus will not become fully torah through being replanted. So replanting is not going to help you. Afanan amitanina. Amar Ravashi, afanan amitanina v'abosar l'rabbis ha'etzim u'levainu. With regard to the meat of shlamim, of peace offering, Pasuk states, and the meat, anyone who is Torah must eat meat. May eat meat. The word and ulevaina seems superfluous. But it is written to include the wood and frankincense, of kodshim among things that are subject to the tumah of foods. So the wood and the frankincense can also become tameh. So the Gemara says, are wood and frankincense truly subject to the tumah of foods? But they are inedible. How can you say that they are subject to the tumah of food, tumas ochlim, if they are inedible? Elamilo, again, it's a stringency that the rabbis imposed upon kodshim, by which even these inedible items are treated as foods, with regard to tumah. Achinamilo, likewise here, with regard to teruma, it is subject to a rabbinically imposed stringency, and thus does not become fully toher upon being replanted. There is a biblical requirement to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. The Mishnah defines what type of matzah must be eaten to fulfill this obligation. Elu devorim, these are the species of grain. Sha'odam yitzur dechavos of Pesach, which a person fulfills his obligation to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. Bechitim, wheat, the matzah made out of wheat, Se'erim, barley, kusmin, spelt, shifon, rye, and shibel shua, and oats. V'yotzin, now one may fulfill his obligation b'demai, with matzah made from demai. Demai is short of domai. What is this? It's produce that has been acquired from an amoritz, an ignorant person. With the passage of time, it became apparent to the sages that many amoritz were becoming less scrupulous in the separation of various tithes. Although they were generally observant and continued to scrupulously separate turma from their produce, many amoritz no longer separated any other tithe but turma. As a result, anyone who purchased produce from an amoritz, from an ignorant person, could not be certain whether the produce was tevel, untithed. Such a product was called demai, in view of the possibility that the demai might be tevel. So the sages forbade purchasers to eat it unless they separated the doubtful meisers. Nevertheless, if one ate matzah made from demai without first separating these tithes, he fulfills his obligation. Okay? V'yotzin b'demai u'b'maiser rishon shenitla trumosei, from maiser rishon whose truma was separated. That's the truma that is going to the Levi, the 10% that is going to the Levi. Yeah. So over here we're dealing with Trumas Meiser that a guy didn't give to the Kohen yet. Okay? Yeah. So Levi got his 10%, and Levi has to give 10% from that to the Kohen.
Right.
So let's say he got 10% of wheat, and he got 10% of wheat, and he made matzah from it.
Yeah.
And he didn't give the Kohen. Once the Trumas Meiser has been separated, it says in the note, the Levi's remaining Meiser Rishon becomes permitted for consumption, even to an ordinary Israelite. And should matzah be made from this produce, one fulfills his obligation by eating it. So the Gemara will speak about the novelty of this law. If everyone can eat, you're probably dealing with a case where he didn't yet give the Meiser to the Kohen, but we'll see if it's correct or not. Because otherwise, what's the chiddush? Meiser sheni ve'egdush nifdu. Oh, Meiser sheni. That's what the Israelite would keep for himself, and he would have to eat in Yerushalayim. And consecrated property that has been redeemed. Koyanim. Likewise, Kohanim may discharge their obligation b'challah, with matzah made from challah, with truma, or from teruma avaleh b'tevel. However, one's obligation cannot be fulfilled with tevel. V'lo b'maaser rishon shelo nitla trumosei. No, with ma'aser rishon whose teruma was not separated. Over here it tells us it's for sure not, meaning Ma'aser Rishon shenitla trumosei, meaning if a Levi got Ma'aser Rishon and he gave teruma to the Kohen, then it's okay. Then he's yotze. We still have to understand what's the chidush. The Mishnah tells us clearly that if Ma'aser Rishon he didn't give teruma, is not yotze. With the mitzvah, the first night, the obligation to eat matzah. No, with Ma'aser Sheni or consecrated property that has not been redeemed. Okay, so that's the second part of the Mishnah. The first part is which things you are yotze. The second part of the Mishnah is mixed between things that you can be yotze, things you cannot be yotze. And the last part of the Mishnah speaks about chalos ha'toida, regarding the unleavened loaves of toida offering. They're not chametz yet. And unleavened wafers, the kiki nozir, unleavened wafers of the offering brought by the nozir. Ason la'atzma, if he made them for himself, ein yotze bo, and he cannot fulfill his obligation to eat matzah with them. Ason limker b'shuk, if he made them to sell in the marketplace, yotze bo, he can fulfill his obligation with them. Let's see. Okay, the Gemara elaborates on the 5 grains mentioned in the Mishnah as valid sources of matzah. 5 grain, we said, wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats. Tana, kusmin, min, chitin. Spelt is a species of wheat. It's in the same family of wheat. Shibol is shual, v'shifrin, min soirin. While oats and rye are the same family of the barley, species of barley. Kusmin gulba. The Gemara says kusmin, spelt, is known as gulba. It's another name, not just kusmin, also gulba. But it's spelt shipo in dishra, and shifon, rye, is known as dishra. Shibol shual, shevili salo. Shibol shual, oats are known as shevili talo. Okay, so it tells that they have also other names. The Mishnah stated that one fulfills its obligation on the first night of Pesach only with matzah made of one of the above 5 grains. The Gemara knows 6 scriptural sources for this. What is the support for this? From the Mishnah we see that the flour of these 5 grains indeed produces valid matzah. But if matzah is made out of rice or millet, it's not kosher. How do we know this? Rabbi Lakish said, "V'chen tan davar Rabbi Yishmael, v'chen tan davar Rabbi Yaakov, Omar kro loisecha olav chometz." You should not eat chometz with it. Meaning, once you eat the matzah, you cannot eat the chometz anymore. Pesach offering is made, you should stop eating chometz. Shiva sem techalom matzahs. Then it says, for 7 days you shall eat matzahs with it. Now, from the juxtaposition of the command to eat matzahs with the prohibition against eating chometz, so we have one commandment to eat matzah, and another commandment, prohibition not to eat chometz. Dvorim raboim. So now, what's the connection between the two? The juxtaposition between the two. Dvorim raboim dechimutz. It is only with things that come to leaven when left to rise. Adam yetzav dechavasav matzah. That a person fulfills his obligation to eat matzah. Boim dechimutz. I mean, it's amazing that in order for you to fulfill your obligation, eating matzah, it needs to be something that can be chometz. If it cannot be chometz, you're not fulfilling your obligation. Yotzu elu
needs to rise.
Needs to be able to rise.
So matzah from rice, it's not okay.
Right, because it would not rise. Yotzu elu she'en ba'im chivutz, excluded from this category then are these types of flour, rice flour, millet flour, which do not come to leaven. They cannot become chametz. Ela lidei sirchon, but on the contrary, they come to spoil if you will leave them in water. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish further notes that the Mishnah's teaching in this regard is disputed by at least one Tana. Matnitin de loka Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Mishnah does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The Mishnah that disqualifies rice or millet flour is source for valid matzah. It doesn't reflect the view of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Oiras min dagan who said that rice is one of the species of grain, according to his opinion. And if rice would rise, somehow rice would rise, one is liable to kores for consuming its leavened form on Pesach. Weizah confirms the assertion that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri indeed considers rice and millet subject to leavening. The Tanya Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Oiser ba'orer ze dochan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri forbids one to eat a dish cooked with rice or millet during Pesach. So we see this goes back already to the time of the Talmud that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, you're not supposed to eat rice on Pesach.
But there must also be a base that you could.
And he explains why. He says, because such grains are close to leavening. Close to leavening. Says they leaven quickly. That's what he writes in the name of the bring over here, the Sfasemis. It discusses this concept. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish appears to understand Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri as saying that rice and millet leaven quickly. They can turn into chametz quickly. Other Amayroim, however, question whether this is really the meaning of his words. Ibalu. What does it mean, shekoreb lahachmitz? Close to leavening. The kodim machmitz, that they leaven quickly. Or perhaps he means that they come close to leavening. Chametz gomur lo yahavi. There's two ways of understanding what he said. When you said korov la'achmitz, it can mean two things. It could either mean that they leaven quickly, or it means that they come close to leavening but not completely chametz. Okay? Tashma, come learn a proof that he means they leaven quickly, not close to leavening. The Tanya, it was taught in a Braita. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, always mean dagan hu, period. Always is a species of grain. To him, it's a grain. And therefore, chayav al chimutz kores, so one is liable to kores consuming its leavened form. If somehow you grinded the rice, you made flour from it, and you allowed it to rise on Pesach, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, chayovin al chimutz kores, one is liable to kores for consuming its leavened form. And one who fulfills his obligation, and if you made matzah from the rice flour or from the millet, you'd fulfilled your obligation, because to him it's a grain. To him, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri used to say, the kromis, soon we have to see what it's kromis, is subject to the challah tithe, for it too is a kind of grain valid for use as flour in matzah. The Gemara in Menachos, it says in 37, derives that only bread made from flour that could produce matzah is subject to the challah tithe. To Meiser, this Tana maintains that bread made from grain from a grain known as keromis meets this requirement. Okay, so it's also a type of grain. The Gemara wants to know what type of grain is it. My keromis. Amar Abaye, what is keromis? Amar Abaye shitzi or shitzoniso. Shitzoniso. The Gemara says, what is shitzoniso? Amar of Papa, my shitzoniso. Amar of Papa, shitzoniso the mishtak chabinig kaloniso. Shitzoniso is that which is found growing among poppy. It's something that grows among poppy. Not your dog. Shitzoniso, it says in 38, as nigla, or the fennel flower. The seeds of this plant, which can be ground into flour, are black in color, but otherwise bear some resemblance to millet. Okay, so to them it's something that is similar to millet, come from poppy seed. At any rate, it is evident that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, dough made from rice or millet leavens completely, becomes chametz. It says in 39, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, although some commentators consider that rice may give rise to chametz nukshe, to solid chametz. Most accord with the view of Rambam, who state that rice products are completely permitted for consumption on Pesach, for they cannot become chametz at all. In keeping with this view, rice is indeed used on Pesach among Sephardim. Ashkenazim, however, although subscribing to Rambam's view in principle, nevertheless avoid the use of rice products because of their similarity in appearance to wheat products, and therefore the Ashkenazim would not use rice on Pesach.
No, but what does the Rambam say?
That rice is not a grain.
It's not a grain.
Rabbi, if you follow Rambam, Chabad, for example, they follow Rambam. You
So-
study Rambam.
He just answers you. He says like this. Although, look at the word, although subscribing to the Rambam's view in principle they follow the Rambam, but in certain details they're not. Not following completely blindly. They're following you in principle. Nevertheless, avoid the use of rice. Rambam said it's mutar. They didn't say you have to eat rice on Pesach. So they took stringency upon themselves. They said just because of the debate.
Okay.
Some say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says it's a grain. They don't want to get involved with it.
The Chinese, they ground it. They make a paste out of it. And then they put it in the steak and deep fry it.
You can
And
buy
then
millet flour in the store. You buy millet flour.
It's called millet flour as well. Rice?
It's another type of questionable grain. We're not calling it a grain even. And rice flour, you can buy rice flour and then bake with it.
But it's not as good as regular flour.
I don't know, but the thing is, there's a question whether it becomes chametz or not. If it becomes chametz, that means you can make matzah out of it. If it doesn't become chametz, you can make matzah out of it. Seemingly, according to this, is really what the Mishnah is all about. Which flour you could use to make matzah, and which you can't. So we learned the criteria is that it needs to be able to become chametz. If it can become chametz, you can use it for matzah. You understand? If it has the possibility to be chametz,
then
you can use it for matzah. So according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, rice can become chametz, and therefore, why? Because it's a grain, and therefore you can use it for matzah. According to rabbis, no.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that it can become hametz.
He does say.
It did
Rabbi
say.
Yochanan ben Nuri, yeah.
So then
He says
it becomes-
shekarov lachmitz. So they said, what does it mean karov lachmitz? He said karov lachmitz means that not only that he said it becomes chametz, it becomes chametz quickly. It can leaven quickly. So
I don't think the rice fermented.
So quickly. It rises, but not so quickly. Takes time.
Earlier, the Gemara derives from Deuteronomy that only those grains having the capacity to become chametz can produce valid matzah. In the following discussion, the Gemara proposes employing the same verse as the basis for a related law. Again, how do we know that if it's becoming chametz, I can use the flour for matzah? Because the two psukim come right after the other. There's a pasuk that tells us the obligation to eat matzah, and the pasuk that tells us not to eat chametz. So since they juxtapose, since they come right next to each other, we learn that they have to be, that one is connected with the other. So earlier, Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rish Lakish, Isa shenilosha beyain v'shemen v'dvash. If you usually, when it comes to, you go to matzah bakery, you see they're only using water, flour and water. But over here, they took dough that was kneaded with wine, oil, or honey instead of water. Ein chayavim al chimutza karet. One is not liable to karet for consuming its leavened form. Once it becomes leaven, now we still don't know what was the main ingredient. It says isa. We can assume that it was made out of flour, regular flour. But since it was not with water, en chavim al chimutza karet, one is not liable to karet for consuming its leavened form. Yosef Rav Papa v'Ravuna Breid Rav Yeshua Kamei de Ravidi bar Ovin, v'Yosef Ravidi bar Ovin v'Kamenamnim. Ravidi bar Ovin was sitting and dozing. Shmuel Ravidi bar Ovin was Menamnim, was sitting and dozing. Amar Ravuna Breid Yeshua Rav Papa. My time of the Rish Lakish. What is the reasoning of Rish Lakish? Why does he exempt from chorus one who eats leavened product made from juices of fruit? If you made how do you make cake? You make cake from usually from juice. Other things but water. Right. And over here it says that if a dough was kneaded with wine, oil, or honey, and it became chametz, you're not liable for eating it on Pesach. So he says, my time of the Rish Lakish, what's his reasoning? Why does he exempt Amar Lei? One second, it says Amar Lei. Rav Papa replied. The answer is the Amar Kra lo tochal of chametz. You shall not eat chametz with it. For 7 days you shall eat matzah with it, which means from the two psukim coming together, from the juxtaposition of the command to eat matzahs, you have a commandment, mitzvah to eat matzah, and then we have the prohibition against eating chametz. We can derive what we can learn from it. Those doughs that which a person can fulfill his obligation to eat matzah, should one bake them in unleavened form, that one is liable to karet on account of eating them in their leavened form. But this dough, made either from wine, oil, or honey, with food juices, does not meet this criterion. Because indeed the product would be rich matzah meaning it's made from other things but flour with juices. So he says the reasoning of Rish Lakish, it says because the two psukim coming together, the pasuk to eat matzah and the pasuk not to eat chametz, so he says if you cannot fulfill your obligation of eating matzah that made out of oil or made out of honey or wine or other food juices, so therefore if you become chametz, you're not liable because you couldn't even be yotze by this one. When you're liable to chorus, if you ate chametz with something that could have been matzah. They could have been yoitze eating it as matzah. Yeah, matzah they mix with water.
Yeah, but this is also.
So over here it calls it matzah shira. Matzah shira, right? but that's the opinion of Rish Lakish. Matzah shira is a product that would be made from
Eggs and flour or orange.
anything but water. Because seemingly water is like a basic ingredient, but the moment that you put other things, then it's an issue. Then it makes a matzah shira. So Eitzivei. Ravuna Brid Rav Yeshua of Papa, Ravuna the son of Rav Yeshua, presented a challenge to Rav Papa from the following item. Imcho gmo. What is imcho gmo? If one dissolved the grain, if one dissolved the grain product in water and then swallowed it on Pesach. So I remember we learned, I think it was in Zavachim and Menachos, when we speak about kosher product, non-kosher products, that if somebody swallowed versus chewing, if there's a question in the Gemara whether it's considered achila or it's not considered achila.
It's not.
Doesn't enjoy it. That's your soul.
He didn't enjoy it. No. So it's a achila.
No, it depends what constitutes achila. If achila constitutes something that I'm chewing, then you're right.
Enjoying it.
What does it say that I have to be enjoying? If somebody swallowed rice instead of chewing the rice and went into his stomach and now he's full, v'achalta v'savata, he's now full. So I can't. V'savata, he's saver. He swallowed food and now he's saver. So it's not so simple, it's not so clear that if I swallow the food, I'm not liable anymore. So if somebody swallowed a non-kosher food, it's a question whether he's liable or not. It's not so simple that he's not liable. You can't just, he's not. It's not so simple.
Without a chaza zecher, you don't have to, it won't be savata. You know what I said? Now, if it's chaza, if he's shoved them down, he swallowed the food. Kasavata, you have to bench zecher.
He's not b'savata if he's davar achel. Why not? If he takes a piece of meat, takes a piece of meat.
Let's say, but the button bench is.
What difference does it
If
make?
it's full. If it's, yes, the behoeft to bench.
If he's have to bench or not.
Yeah.
Seemingly he would have to say the bracha.
Huh?
Seemingly, he would have to say. Someone was if someone is the Holocaust, right? Say someone is in the Holocaust.
No.
He can only eat non-kosher food. He's allowed to eat p'sus nefesh. He has to eat. So he shouldn't say a bracha before and after. If he can say a bracha, let's say
He was allowed to eat that.
right, he's allowed to eat it.
It's not chaza for him.
Right.
If it was alcohol, it's not chaza for him.
So let's see. Imcho gmo, so the guy, if one dissolved the grain product, and it's like taking bread, putting it in the soup, so it becomes part of the soup. He dissolved it in the soup, and then he swallowed it. So there was no chewing involved. So here's another example: is soup considered food or not? If I take vegetables,
It depends what's inside.
no, 1 second. So I take vegetables, and I put meat, and I grind it all together in the pot, and now it's creamy, it's liquid. So there's no chewing involved. It's only putting it in your mouth and drinking it. So it's not achila.
So I give you the same thing, few things. Carrot juice, is that bore adama, mezonot,
Shakor.
or shakol?
No, it's fine.
Same thing.
No, but we're talking about is it considered achila or not?
Well, is carrot considered
So according to, if we say that it's not achila, it doesn't have to be kosher carrot juice or other juices. They don't
It
have
has
to be.
kosher. I'll tell
Why?
you
It's not achila.
Because the machine
No. But even if they put non-kosher stuff in there,
is not a
forget the machine. The machine can
drinking.
be. You say, well, it's drinking, but we also know that we have a problem with drinking things that are not kosher. So in this case, the Gemara says, "Imchau Gemara." If one dissolved the grain product and he swallowed it on Pesach, Im chametzu, if the product was of chametz variety, onush koros, his punishment is koros. He's liable to karet. Ve'im matzu, and if it was matzah that he dissolved in the water, ein adam yotzei yedei chovato Pesach. One cannot fulfill his obligation to eat matzah on Pesach by swallowing this product. So we have the mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach, and if you took the matzah and mixed it in the soup, dissolved it into the soup, you did not fulfill your obligation.
Some don't do that. Ashkenazim don't do that.
Right.
Because they think in my rice.
Right. But as it is so quickly that it doesn't have a chance to rise, and you swallowed it. A question is something else. A question the Gemara wants to know,
If it's
you did the mitzvah of eating matzah or didn't do the mitzvah of eating matzah?
that's
Oh, you gotta do it?
So in eating, you have to chew to fulfill. If you don't chew,
So,
you're liable to commit.
seemingly, we see that to do the mitzvah of eating matzah, you need to chew it. But here we have something dissolved matzah, which when it is unleavened form, a person does not fulfill his obligation to eat matzah with it. And yet one is liable to chorus on account of consuming its leavened form. We see then that the principle you have formulated does not hold true. What was the principle that we learned before? If something becomes chametz, it can turn into chametz, then you are fulfilling your obligation of eating matzah. It needs to have that. You need to be able to make chametz out of it if you wanted to. So then you made matzah, you fulfilled your obligation. So what's the proof that? What's the challenge that Rav Huna is challenging Rav Papa? Rav Papa said that according to Rish Lakish, a dough that was made of wine, oil, or honey, it became chametz and you ate it, I'm not liable. Right? That was Rav Papa's teaching. That was Rish Lakish teaching. It comes Rav Papa and says why, and he says there is a rule. If it becomes chametz, you're liable. If it turns into chametz, you become liable. And if something you couldn't make matzah with it, it turns into chametz, you're not liable. Meaning I couldn't make matzah with dough that was made out of wine, honey, matzah shira. Matzah shira, I couldn't fulfill my obligation with matzah shira. I can only fulfill my obligation. So therefore I shouldn't be liable. So comes Rav Huna and he challenges Rav Papa. He says, we have an example over here. That if somebody dissolved chametz into the soup, if you take a piece of bread on Pesach and you dissolve it into the soup and you swallow it, right? It says, im chametz anush karet. If it's chametz, it's liable to karet. Even though it's little crumbs in the water. You took bread crumbs, chametz, put them in the water, and now you put them in the soup, and now you're drinking it. Chayav karet, anush karet. Now, if he did with matzah, not with chametz, he didn't do the mitzvah. He didn't do the mitzvah of eating matzah. Ein adam yotzei yedei chovato Pesach. So what does it prove to me? Here we have something dissolved matzah, which is when it is unleavened form. It's an unleavened form. It's not chametz. A person does not fulfill his obligation to eat matzah with it. And yet one is liable to chorus on account of consuming its leavened form. So we see that the principle you have formulated does not hold true. Ital Be'urav Idi Bar Ovin, who has been dozing, awoke. He awoke. Amar Le'u Dardekainu Tamid Rish Lakish. He said, Leds means young kids, you have misunderstood the principle behind the law. This is the reason why Rish Lakish disqualifies wine, oil and honey for use in matzah. Why not to make matzah with honey, oil, or wine? Mishum da'avalu mei peros, because these liquids are juices of fruits called mei peros. Umei peros are machmitzim, and juices of fruits cannot cause the dough to be chametz. So the Gemara cites and analyzes the Mishnah's next ruling. The Mishnah said, Yoitze b'demai u'v'maisa. One may fulfill his obligation with matzah made from demai and maser. What is demai? We learned before that it's a grain of food that was bought from Am Haaretz, and we don't know, demai is domai, we don't know what is it. Is it tithed? He gave maser or he didn't give maser? Now he made matzah with it. But is it not fit for him to eat? So how come is he allowed to make matzah with it and be yotze? The Gemara answers, because there is a way to do it. If he wanted, he would renounce ownership of his property. Have it only. He becomes a poor person and is now allowed to eat the mai. At tefillah b'8:30. Ashtanami chazile. It follows that now too the demai can be viewed as having been fit for his consumption. So since there's a way for him to eat, usually you're not allowed to eat demai because you don't know if they gave maser or not. But but ani, a poor person, is allowed to eat demai. So you can say, I'm giving all. Demai is food that. No. It's food that you bought from an Am Haaretz. And what's the problem with it? You don't know if he gave maser or didn't give maser. So you're not allowed to eat it. But a poor person is allowed to eat it. You're not poor, but you can say, I'm giving away all my everything I own, I give away, and therefore at that moment I become poor, and now I'm allowed to eat it. But nobody heard me, so nobody takes anything. Nobody takes my properties, but I'm considered poor, and therefore I'm allowed to eat it. So I say this is a trick that you can be yotze. We learned that we may feed the poor demai, v'tachsonya demai. We may feed traveling Jewish soldiers demai. V'amar Rav Huna Tono. It was taught in a Baita Bis Shammai. Ein ma'achilu esanim demai. According to Bet Shammai, which we know are more machmir, they're more strict. He said you're not allowed to feed poor people demai, v'sachsanya demai, or the traveling soldiers demai. V'sila le'em ma'achilim. V'sila says that you can feed them demai. So our Mishnah follows the opinion of Beis Hillel. The next part of the Mishnah is cited Maser Rishon. One fulfills his obligation of Maser Rishon with matzah made from Maser Rishon. So if you made matzah from Maser Rishon, the Levi gets 10% of your crop, and you made matzah with it. Okay, so it's okay. But since the Levi separated Truma already, the Levi has to give 10% from what he receives to the Kohen, and then everyone can eat it. The Levi, the Yisrael, the Maser Rishon. The it's obvious. The moment you gave Truma, meaning the Levi gave his portion to the Kohen, it becomes chulin. And what's the chiddush that we're allowed to eat it? What is the Mishnah teaching me that I'm allowed to eat matzah that was made from Maser Rishon, shenitla Trumasa, that the Levi already gave to Truma?
I didn't understand, Rabbi. The Levi gives to the Kohen, then
I'm Israel. I gave you your Levi. I gave you 10% of the crop.
Okay.
And you took from 10%, and you gave 10% to the Kohen. So your 10% becomes now chulin, regular food that you can eat. So you made matzah with it, and the Mishnah tells me that the matzah that you made, you fulfill your obligation. So the Gemara says, what's the chiddush that you fulfill your obligation? Obviously, it's chulin. Everybody can eat it. Once you gave from your portion you gave to the Kohen, it's regular food. So what is the Mishnah teaching me? The Mishnah is not written for nothing. It has to have a teaching. It has to have a reason why it's telling it to us. If you tell me that it's my solution shaloi nitla teruma, so my solution that you didn't give teruma, I can say, oh, it's a chidush. But the Mishnah clearly says that if you didn't give teruma, you're not yotzi. You made matzah from it. You didn't fulfill your obligation. So the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha. The ruling is necessary. What shikdimo bashibolim. One advanced the separation of the Ma'aser Rishon ahead of the separation of Truma. That's a problem. You see, usually, in this case,
To give Truma first.
usually you got to give Truma first, and then Ma'aser Rishon. Right? We have Truma Gedola. Truma Gedola, Israel has to give. If you're Israel and you are growing wheat, you have to give Truma Gedola to the Kohen.
Gift.
A gift to the Kohen, it doesn't have to have a number, as much as you want. Ein Yafo, ein Ro, ein Beinonis, but you have to give. That's Truma. Then you have to give 10% to the Levi.
Which lady?
Levi, to the Levi, to the Levim.
10%.
10%. So what happened if he swapped the order? He gave first Ma'aser Rishon to the Levi. He didn't give Teruma to the Kohen. And he gave, the Levi right away went ahead and gave Teruma to the Kohen. That's the Chiddush of the Mishnah. That is, Venot laimenu Terumas Ma'aser, velonit laimenu Teruma Gedola. Teruma Gedola was not taken. Nevertheless, the grain is still permitted for consumption. In accordance with the teaching of Rabbi Abau, the grain can indeed be used to produce valid matzah, that you can still make matzah from it. Ma'aser Rishon, whose separation one advanced ahead of Teruma separation, meaning he gave Ma'aser before Teruma. Potum Teruma Gedola is exempt from Teruma Gedola. Why is he exempt? Shenema and you shall separate to Hashem from it, Hashem's Teruma, Terumas Hashem, a Ma'aser from the Ma'aser. So this pasuk is understood to be exclusionary, and it is interpreted as follows: Ma'aser min ha'Ma'aser amarti lecha, v'leTeruma Gedola Terumas Ma'aser min ha'Ma'aser. A Ma'aser from a Ma'aser, which is the Levi giving 10% from what he received. I told you that the Levi to separate from Ma'aser to give to the Kohen, and not both Teruma Gedola and Terumas Ma'aser. So it's not, I didn't obligate you to do both. I obligate to do one. What is the main thing? Is the Levi give to the Kohen.
And you give to the Levi.
I give to the Levi, Levi gives to the Kohen. So Amar leRav Papa leAbai Ela Me'ato Afilu Akdim V'Kiri Now Lipoto. Says, if you're saying, if we go along with what you just said, that Teruma Gedola seemingly is not an obligatory thing, that Ma'aser and Ma'aser is more important. If there is indeed a scriptural decree exempting a Levi from separating Teruma Gedola from his Ma'aser, he doesn't have to do it. Meaning, the obligation is on the Yisrael, not on the Levi. The Levi has to give Ma'aser min ha'Ma'aser, not Teruma Gedola. Just because the Yisrael messed up and didn't give Teruma Gedola, it's not a problem of the Levi. Ela me'ato. But now, if there is indeed a scriptural decree exempting a Levi from Teruma Gedola, from his Ma'aser, afilu ikdimu b'kiri nameli potter, even if he advanced the separation of the Ma'aser ahead of the Teruma, when the grain was already in a finished pile, you should also be, when you say kiri means it's a finished pile. You should also be exempt from separating Teruma Gedola. Why does the law apply only where the Ma'aser was first taken from unprocessed produce? It says the law applies, everything that we just said before applies only when he gave Ma'aser from unprocessed grain, from unprocessed produce. But if it's processed, seemingly it's not valid. Amar lei alecho makro, in response to your question, Scripture says, Mikol matnoiseichem torimu eskol turumas havai. From all your gift portions, you shall separate all of Hashem's teruma. What does it come to tell us? So it says in number 12, this pasuk refers to the Levim. All of Hashem's teruma implies that in certain instances the phrase Hashem's teruma includes more than one teruma. This is applied to the case where the Levi collects his meiser in advance of the teruma at the later stage, when the produce is already processed in a pile of grain, rather from the unprocessed ears. The Levi must then separate approximately 1/5 of the meiser for teruma gedola. So we see that if the Levi comes and collects his meiser in advance of the teruma,
He has to give.
from the kri, which means at a later stage, when it's already in a pile, it's smooth in a pile, then he has the obligation to give teruma gedola. Umaroi, so and what did you see to interpret the verse, which obligates the Levi to separate teruma gedola from meiser, to refer to meiser taken from the pile, and the pasuk which exempts the Levi from separating teruma gedola from meiser, to refer to meiser taken from unprocessed ears. Why not the reverse? So the question now that says Umar Iso, he says, who decided, where did you take it, that if the Levi takes to his meiser from unprocessed grain, that he doesn't have to give teruma gedola, and when he takes his meiser from processed grain from the pile, and then he suddenly is liable to teruma gedola. Maybe it's the opposite. That's the question of Maraita. Maybe it's the opposite. Who said it works that way? Send the logic of the Gemara, always challenging everything from the source, from the bottom, from any kind of notion that you come, the Gemara will question it. Hai idgon, this produce heaped in piles, that's the kri, has become finished grain. So that's what we call processed grain. It's finished grain. Vai lo idgon, with this unprocessed ears, has not become finished grain. It tells you because one is finished and one is not finished. Let's look at 14. It says produce attains the status of grain only after its raw processing has been completed. When do I call it grain? When does it get the name grain? Only once you finished processing it. Only after its raw processing has been completed. It is smoothed in a pile. Therefore, that is the point at which the obligation to separate teruma and meiser takes effect.
What about going inside your home?
As he brings it, he says, as the pasuk in Devarim, it says, the first of your grain shall you give to the Kohen. It stands to reason that the pasuk requiring the Levi to make restitution of the preempted teruma gedola to the Kohen. If it is the case which Levi preempted it after the Kohen had already become entitled to it. When is it considered that the Levi preempted, that the Levi came before the Kohen and took it? Only once the grain was ready. Once the grain was ready, I can say the Levi came and took it before the Kohen. But if the grain was not ready, the Kohen was not ready to receive also. So I can't say he took it before. When it's considered taking, once the grain is ready. Then I can say the Kohen should have taken, and then the Levi. And it stands to reason that the pasuk exempting the Levi from making restitution of the preempted teruma gedola to the Kohen refers to a case where the Levi preempted it before the Kohen became entitled to it, while the grain was still in ears. So that's the logic of Maro Isu. The Gemara cites the Mishnah's next ruling, Ma'aser Sheni ve'ekdesh shenifdu. If you used the flour of Ma'aser Sheni is the 10% that the Yisrael will take from his from his crop, we take it to Yerushalayim. V'hekdesh shenifdu, or hekdesh that was redeemed. And you made matzah with it. The Mishnah says that you yotze. The first night you fulfilled your obligation. The Gemara said again, it's pshita, it's obvious. Once these products have been redeemed, they're regular food, they're chulin. So what's the chidush of the Mishnah? The Gemara says, what is the chidush of the Mishnah? We know that he has to give a surcharge. The surcharge is chomish. He has to give another fifth, because
If he sells.
if he redeems, when he redeems the ekdesh, he has to give a fifth chomish. Now, let's say he didn't give the chomish yet. So we can say that it still has kedusha in it. Ma'aser sheni still has kedusha. The ekdesh still has kedusha. Now he made matzah with it. It's a question whether he can eat it or not. Comes the Mishnah tells you he's allowed to eat it. So now you see that there is a chidush in what the Mishnah is saying. So we see the Mishnah tells us the chomish is not me'akiv, is not preventing the redemption from taking effect. It's still considered redeemed even though it didn't give the chomish. Why they did it? Because always when there's an exchange of money, there is, if it's you will always be more lenient. So when you're exchanging money, you have to give a little bit extra.
But he's not losing anything in the Chaimish. He's taking it up anyway to Yerushalayim. For him to eat it. No, he's not a Chaimish.
So that's what they're saying. It's no. That's why they're not
The
making.
Chaimish is not being punished b'chalal.
No, it's not punished, but it's to make sure that it's done. It's to make sure that it's done properly. So you do it. It's a little extra.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was once a factory. They sold toilet paper, and they wrote on the toilet paper that they have 105 sheets. Okay, somewhat, and all the other ones were 100. So one day, there was a crazy guy decided he wants to count all the papers. So they counted, all of them were missing. They said 100, but it was 90, 95. It was not 100. The only one that said 105 was 105. Okay. So they made a big deal about it, and his business became crazy. Like he got a lot of publicity, and over here it's like you make the exchange, but sometimes you gotta make it a little bit less. Most people they gave less than what they said they would give.
It's like with the yogurt. You get the yogurt, it's a half. It's not even full.
What? No, but what does it say? What does it say in the
Ounces.
If it says 3 ounces and you weigh
It
it,
is
and it's
3
still
ounces.
3 ounces,
3 ounces.
they are correct.
They're
Meaning-
correct.
Why you give me a big container and 3 ounces on it?
Oh, the guy that...
Ganav, with some container gadol.
They're allowed to
With
do
3
it.
ounces.
They're allowed to do it. They're allowed.
It's deceiving the people.
Oh, so you're saying it's packaging is everything, they say in America.
Yeah.
Packaging is, so they want you to buy it because they think you're getting a lot, but if you don't read it says 3 ounces, they give you 3 ounces.
Yeah,
So they're yotze.
But it's a good of that. It is. I think it's a good of that.
Yeah. You say it's gnevat dat.
Good of that. Because when a person buys the container...
כל המחירות זה גנבת דעת.
Okay.
5 pounds of flour. The bag is this big. You keep opening, and the flour is down there. You can put another 5 pounds in the bag because it's so big.
Yeah.
And you think you got more flour. ממש גנבת דעת. זה יותר גרוע
But you
של
read,
גנוב.
it says 5 pounds. You get 5 pounds.
See, you know why it's Geneva that?
You have to be an educated consumer.
You know why it's Geneva that? When a person looks at a container from the yogurt, he thinks it's a container of yogurt there.
Yeah.
He doesn't buy
He
it because
doesn't
of
look
the
at the ounces. He looks
He
at the
buys the
container.
container.
Sure.
That's why they did it bigger to fool the people.
זה הגנבת דעת, כן.
Everything Geneva that.
In marketing, we study there exist 4 P's to sell a product. You have to have product, place, price, promotion, and they added the 5 P, which is package.
In America,
Factors.
packaging is everything. They say
Before.
no. I'm saying they say this is the main thing. It's
They say the main thing, the packaging, the way it looks like.
right.
It doesn't mean the packaging, what you think that you shouldn't be Gnevis does. The packaging to show the product, but they don't.
Packaging is the Gnevas done. I tell you why.
If it
Why do you
looks
think
nice,
when you go into the store and your little child wants the chocolate or he wants the candy, why does he want the candy?
The package.
Look at the packaging of the bread and look at the packaging of of
Then it goes to the chocolate.
of the chocolate. This is attractive. This is
he knows the chocolate is there. Sorry. the child goes in. He knows
I'm
the
telling you,
chocolate
if they put candy in a lousy packaging,
It'll go for the chocolate.
less people would buy it. But the moment that they make the packaging attractive, people buy it. But okay,
When they invented that Snapple iced tea and peaches and all that, the word Snapple, it hits in the head. Snap. So people like looking
okay,
at
so that's also the wording of it.
The
They want it to
wording,
be
yeah.
catchy, catchy.
bottle.
Yeah.
first it was in glass, now it's plastic.
Anyhow,
Change the bottles of wine, the way they fool the company, the ganuvim they are. There used to be a bigger bottle. Now they're selling the smaller bottles.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah.
And it's less wine there.
Well, again, like Rabbi said, what did it say there? 16 ounces? You got 16 ounces in the in this big bottle.
והכהנים בחלו ותרומה, so the Kohanim may fulfill their obligation with matzah made from challah or from teruma. The Gemara says again, it's pshita, it's obvious that the Kohanim are permitted to eat challah and teruma. Why would one think that they could not fulfill their obligation with matzah having the status of challah teruma? Ma'udatema, you might have said matzah shovel lecholodim beina, matzah that is equally suitable to everyone. To think a matzah that is equally suitable for all people is indeed to fulfill one's obligation. Challah or teruma, which cannot be eaten by everyone, cannot by eating. Levi cannot eat challah or teruma. Israelim cannot eat challah or teruma. So maybe I would think that the Kohen is not allowed to eat it. Kamash malan matzahs riba. The Mishnah therefore informs us that this is not the case. The Torah mentioned the word matzahs and then repeats the word matzahs to include matzahs that only certain classes, only Kohanim can eat. The Mishnah then says you're not allowed to eat matzah that is tevel. Matzah made from tevel flour or tevel grain, you cannot eat. What is tevel? You know that Maaseh was not given. Demai, it's domai, I don't know whether the Amoritz gave Maaseh or not. Tevel, I know he didn't give. So when you have certainty, it's called tevel. Avalo betevel, the most obvious pshita. So the Gemara answers, lo, tzaricha, we need it. Why do we need it? Betevel tovel midirabono. Why? For produce that is biblically permitted for consumption, but it nevertheless ordained tevel by rabbinic decree. What is considered tevel by the Chachamim and not by the Torah? Meaning the certain tevel that's biblical tevel, and a certain tevel that's rabbinical. What is it? A person planted the grain in a flower pot that was not perforated. There was no holes in the flower pot. So he says, it never grew in the ground, so therefore I don't have to give maaseh. Comes the Chachamim and added that it's also considered tevel. Even if you have a greenhouses, that they have everything above ground, right? You can see a lot of greenhouses, they have pots, they're growing everything in pots.
From the soil.
Yeah, not even 5 feet from the floor, or about 2 or 3 feet on tables. They're growing everything on tables. Now they're growing in
Tomatoes, the same thing.
in the Negev. It's desert. It's desert sand. You can't grow anything
Beautiful
there,
tomatoes.
and they're growing. They're greenhouses.
Peppers, tomatoes.
So you have to give meiser from it, but rabbinically, it's rabbinical tevel. It's not biblical tevel. The chiddush over here that even if he used rabbinical tevel to make matzah, he's not allowed to eat it.
You think because he has a unique there from the ground?
There's no unika from the ground.
In the Negev. There's no unique.
No nika from the ground.
Okay.
So the Shemitah is not kicking in there. Next
Right.
year's Shemitah, the following year will be Shnat Shemitah, and you don't have to stop growing. Nothing is connected to the ground. That's when Otzi Sheinu Nakuv. Otzi Sheinu Nakuv.
to stop and Shemitah. Because she's a little bit.
Katuv Shav Ta'aretz, the land is resting. It doesn't touch the
Yeah,
land.
but the bottom line was that they take a box, a square, and put the mud inside, and that's how the tomatoes grow.
Water.
It's above the ground. No, also the.
No,
not only water.
there's a hydroponic that they grow on. They use like a 4-inch pipe.
Right.
They cut it in the middle, and the plants are just touching water. The water is moving
Circling all
slowly.
around.
Yeah, circling, and it's growing without touching any soil. Some of them touching soil that is not connected to the ground. But
Right.
the point that he wants to say over here,
Because
Atzit
now in the
she'eino
ground-
nakuv, that even though he's still obligated to the laws of Tevel, meaning he's still obligated to give Maser, and if he didn't give Maser, it's considered Tevel, and if he made matzah from it, he is liable, he didn't fulfill his obligation, he didn't do the mitzvah of eating matzah. Why? Maybe because it's mitzvah bo ba'avero. He's eating matzah that is Tevel.
Yeah, but
Only water.
What's shaft? Why should the lechatchila be table?
no, it's not only water.
Yes, it is.
No,
It
inside.
says it's Zeras Chachomim.
I have a friend.
Because
friend
I
in
think
Israel.
ought to
That's
lead, if they wouldn't give him a Noku, they give him Noku.
Huh?
I wanted to sell this to Home Depot. I have a friend in Israel. He has
ולא
a-
ימאס ראשון לתרומוסי, no one can fulfill his obligation with matzah made for Maser Rishon. As Truma was not separated. So let's say the Levi didn't give the coin, and now he made matzah from that flour. He's not dates also, the Mishnah says. The Gemara is a pshita. It's obvious. The Gemara says, lo, it's richa, we need this teaching, shigdimu bakri. But the Levi advanced the separation of Maser Rishon ahead of the Truma Gdelo, when the grain was already in the finished pile. Subsequently, he separated Trumas Meiser from the portion he had taken, but he did not separate Truma Gedolah. So when he take it from the Kri, we already learned that now the Levi is obligated also Truma Gedolah. So if he give Trumas Meiser, but he didn't give Truma Gedolah, he's still not. He's not Yotze eating this matzah. To the produce in the Levi's hands is no longer tevel, as Rav Papa proposed to Abaye above, because he gave Trumas Meiser. Consequently, it may be used to produce valid matzah. Kamashman Kedushan, therefore the Mishnah comes to tell us that it's not kosher matzah. In other words, the produce remains tevel until the missing Truma Gedolah is also separated, until you take care of the coin. You didn't take care of the coin, you did not, whatever you have is tevel, and if you eat it, you didn't do the mitzvah of eating matzah. And that's why we need the teaching that Maser Rishon shelo nita Trumosei doesn't mean that he's not referring to the Trumas Meiser, he's referring to Truma Gedolah. So to make it more practical, if I'm giving you, I'm the Yisrael, you are the Levi, and I'm giving you 10% from my crop, you have the obligation to give 10% to the Kohen from your crop. And
Why don't you just give him straight to the Kohen? Why you give it to the Levi? And Levi has to give 10% to the Kohen.
I also have to give to the Kohen.
Oh.
You have to give the Kohen, and I have to give the Kohen. I have to give the Kohen to Truma Gedolah, and you have to give the Kohen to Umat Maaser. So I give you 10%. I give you 10% of
To
mine.
the Levi?
Yeah, and you, the Levi, give him 10%. The
Someone
Kohen.
else will give him 20 instead of give it to the Levi. Why
No,
give the Levi? The
but
Levi has to give it to the Kohen anyway.
The Torah wants the Levi to give also.
Yeah, but it's not his, so...
It is his because I gave you. Now
You
it's
gave
yours.
it to him. He never had it its own.
Now you have it. Now I gave you. You have to give the Kohen. Okay? So that's clear, right? You have to give the Kohen
Kohen.
10%. It's called
And then he has
maaser.
to
It's
do
called
maaser.
It's called tumat maaser or maaser mina maaser. Okay, maaser mina maaser. That you have to give maaser from the maaser that you got. You know the halachically, if I give my maaser, I made $1,000. I give the poor person $100. He also has to give tzedakah. He has obligation to give tzedakah. A poor person, certain times he doesn't have what to eat. But
That's
saying,
the question.
but no, I'm not talking about somebody that's starving. It doesn't.
For example, I am the poor. I receive 100. This 100, this is my food. I can't give.
Okay.
So I have
No,
to
you
give. I
don't.
have to
But
give.
if you have a little extra, then you have to give. Yeah.
From this 100,
Okay.
this is my living.
No,
so
then
I
you
have
don't
to-
have to give.
Oh.
There's a quote. It's not so simple. There's a quote says something. You have to give, put aside, and if you can't, you have to make a
Once it
divide it
doesn't
down.
save it, the only doesn't save any money, which the guy gave him. I don't think he'd be mechuyev to give any money from it.
It
It doesn't
doesn't.
save any money.
It doesn't save it. Nothing left.
Nothing left. We made it.
Well, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe explains of what is considered when is it that you don't have to give someone else. So if let's say you have a filet mignon steak in your plate, you're a poor person, but I gave you the money, and you have a filet mignon, and the poor person wants bread to survive. It's not so clear. But if you have basics, you have the basics. You don't have any delicacies on your plate. You're not buying these things, then you don't have to give. But when you treat yourself with
Expensive stuff.
it's not so simple. So the Alter Rebbe goes into the famous question, the Gemara, when it says "Chayecho koidmin l'chay chavercho," that your life takes precedence over the life of your friend. So he said, when is it true that your life? It says when you're talking about basic things. But if you have all the madonim, you have all the delicacies. Says, well, my wife takes precedence before you, so I need to have the boat and I need to have this. And once I have all these things, I can give you tzedakah. He says, no, it doesn't work that way. It says, when did they say that chayecho, that your life takes precedence of someone else? Is when you have kitun shemaim, when you holding a bottle of water, and you have exactly the amount of 50. I'll drink if I drink it and you drink it, we both die, and So the point was that you have to give 10% from what I gave you, right? And if you didn't give, and you made matzah with it, your matzah is not good. So what is the chiddush of the Mishnah? So the Gemara tells the chiddush of the Mishnah is if you, the Levi, took from the kri, from the completed, before the Kohen. So now you have obligation to give maaser, mina maaser, tumat maaser, and you also have an obligation to give tumat gdola. And if you only did one, you gave tumat maaser and you didn't give tumat gdola, and then you made matzah and ate the matzah, you did not fulfill your obligation, because since your obligation is also to give tumat gdola because you took from the kri, you have the obligation to bring tumat gdola, and you didn't bring it. If he doesn't drink his coffee in the morning, it's out.
You could have drank the coffee in the morning.
What?
Till 10 to 6 you would be able to.
Yeah, but he needs to continuously drink it.
It's eggs,
He-
oatmeal, coffee,
Yeah.
It's part of coffee. It's not a cup of coffee.
No, he comes with a 16 ounce
16
and he constantly sips.
He dives in first, then he drinks it.
Because the mikveh is closed. That's
Yeah,
why.
that's
No, the mikveh is open.
It's open now.
Mikveh is open.
You opened it.
Long time ago. What are you talking about?
Right.
Already.
Yeah.
There's almost no water in there because it's been open a long time.
Everybody swallowed the water.
Okay. Can one discharge his obligation with Ma'aser Sheni or consecrated property that was not redeemed? So you didn't redeem it, so you cannot use it for matzah. The Gemara says again, pshita, it's obvious. The Gemara says, lo ilo the nifdu. They were redeemed. Umay lo nifdu shelo nifdu kilchosim. It says that he didn't do the redemption properly. Maaseh sheni shepedo al gavasim. What does it mean not to redeem properly? What's the difference between what is redeeming properly and not redeeming properly? So in the case of pedoy al gavasim, what does it mean pedoy al gavasim? This would refer to where one redeemed it by attempting to transfer its sanctity onto unminted slug. Unminted back then, money, if it was minted, it had worth, and if it wasn't minted, it didn't have worth. So he was trying to be a wise guy, and he tried to redeem his Ma'aser Sheni or Hekdesh al Gava Simon on money that was not minted, rather than onto minted coin. And a redemption done in such a manner is not effective. So the Rachman Omar Vetzarto Akesef Biodecho, merciful one says in the Torah, and you shall Vetzarto. What is Vetzarto? Money that has tzura, davar sheish lo tzura, money that it was minted, that has an image on it, that you can say this is coming from. If I take a dollar coin and I'll polish it, you can't use it anymore, destroyed. Ve'ekdesh shechil al gabe karka, and in the case of consecrated produce, hekdesh, redeemed but not redeemed properly. What does it mean not to redeem hekdesh properly? Where one deconsecrated onto real property, and a deconsecration of consecrated items done by substituting land for them is ineffective. It says if you take hekdesh and you try to redeem it with karka, it doesn't work. That's not doing it. Why? Why? Because the because he has to take the money and go with it to Yerushalayim. And he didn't take it to. You can't take karka to Yerushalayim, so therefore it's ineffective. And if you did matzah with it, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of eating matzah. I
read that in Sodom, the coins were minted with your name. So when you pay to the store, they knew where this money is coming from. So if you give to the poor people, and this guy will come to a store and pay something,
no, it's not his.
Who's from whose money. I read in the book this.
Tanu Rabbanon. The rabbis told him, one might have thought that a person can fulfill his obligation on the first night of Pesach with matzah made from tevel that has not been fixed. The Gemara interprets the Baisa to clarify the seeming redundancy. It's obvious in the phrase tevel that has not been fixed. What do you mean? You can fix tevel. What's the issue with tevel? Then give Maisa. So give Maisa and fix it. Call tevel nami hai halo niskan. If you call it tevel, it means it's not been fixed. Ela betevel shel niskan called tzorko. It was fixed halfway, not called tzorko, not into the necessary extent. Shenitla mimena truma gdoilo v'notno truma Maisa. He gave the coin, but didn't give the Levi. Ma'aser Rishon v'la Ma'aser Sheni, or he gave Ma'aser Rishon, but he didn't separate Ma'aser Sheni. V'afilu Ma'aser Oni, or even grain from which everything except Ma'aser Oni was separated. So he separated everything, but not Ma'aser Oni, or he gave Ma'aser Oni, he didn't give the other ones. Look at 30. It's unbelievable how severe it is. It says one is subject to mito b'dei shomayim, death at the hands of heaven for eating grain before Truma Gedola has been separated.
It's in his hands.
You know, one time
because it's not his.
You know, I one time landed in Israel, and I haven't been there for a long time. It was I saw a guy selling fruits. Fruits I didn't eat for a long time. It was they don't have it in America, but it's a fruit called shesek. Okay, so I said shechianu. So I stopped by, I bought a box, and I continued to my house from the airport. Continued to the house. So I come home. My father tells me,
How do you know
how do you know this guys didn't? It was a year right after the Shemitah year. So he said, how do you know these guys are not? So couldn't eat it. Couldn't eat. It's like you don't think about this thing over here because it's we don't have the Shemitah, Meiser, not Meiser. Over there, they still have it. Yeah.
You know, a lot of stores sell produce from Eretz soil. You have to be careful.
Yeah, I heard that the
I
little
the
peppers,
store says it's soil.
the little
Carrots
peppers.
and everything.
So then you have to do Meiser. But if it has a gachel, they already gave Meiser.
Yes, that's good. How do you know there's
Anything,
on the carrot?
if anything, only oranges, as far as we know.
No,
Carrots,
the small,
onion, celery, don't
the,
come here.
the small peppers.
I
They,
saw
they,
it.
they have in
I saw
Costco
it.
those little peppers.
The chili,
No, not chili.
dry,
No. They're making now the peppers regular. The yellow, the red, the green.
yeah, in a package, one package.
Right. So
Yeah.
they have smaller ones also in a bag.
Right.
And
It's
those
sweet.
I heard. Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard that they're coming from Israel.
You look up on the pack. It says where it comes from.
Most of them Mexico,
Yeah.
California,
Yeah.
but I check everything. But
If you check, it's good. But I was just telling you, I saw the.
those sweet peppers, they have them here. They look hot, but they're not.
Menayin. Now, from where do we
When you
know
cook 'em,
that such tevel cannot be used to create valid matzah?
they fall apart.
From where do we know that such tevel cannot be used to create valid matzah? Talmud Leimar lo yisech olav chometz. You shall not eat chometz with it. For 7 days you shall eat matzah with it. Now, from the connection between the two psukim, the juxtaposition of the command, we have the mitzvah to eat matzah, and then we have the prohibition, the warning against eating chometz. So, what do we learn from the connection between the two? Mishi suri mishum bal techal chometz. Grain whose restriction comes on account not eating chometz with it, the prohibition against eating chometz. If the grain is left to leaven, only such grain can create valid matzah when baked in its unleavened form. Yotzeh excluded then is this type of grain that is tevel. She'en isur mishum bal techal chometz. It doesn't have the issue of not eat chometz because it's not chometz. Ela mishum bal techal tevel. It's a definite issue. On an account, do not eat tevel. But as regards to grain that is tevel, where did the chometz prohibition go? If such grain did become chometz, then you have a double wamo. It's a double issue. It's chometz and tevel. Would not be prohibited for consumption as chometz in addition to the being tevel. If tevel turned into chometz, is not going to, you have it now. It's like
Two provisions.
yeah, it's like eating something not kosher on a fast day, right? The fast day, eating something not kosher. It's a double. It's a double violation. It's Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that a prohibition cannot take effect upon a pre-existing prohibition. Hence, the grain would indeed not be prohibited as chametz. It would be prohibited only under the pre-existing tevel restriction. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer, it's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, one who eats nevela from Yom Kippur is exempt from bringing chatos offering for eating on Yom Kippur. He is liable for the nevela, not for the Yom Kippur, because the nevela was pre-existing before Yom Kippur. If you look at number 1, it says here, Rabbi Shimon demonstrated his opinion that when an item is already forbidden under one prohibition, is already forbidden, like the tevel was already forbidden under one prohibition, another prohibition cannot become superimposed upon it. Although ordinarily one who inadvertently, by mistake, he eats on Yom Kippur, transgresses a prohibition for which he must bring a chatos. If somebody by mistake ate on Yom Kippur, forgot that it's Yom Kippur, he woke up in the middle of the night, he drank something, he has to bring a chatos offering. If the meat was already prohibited as nevela, but if he ate a nevela on Yom Kippur, so the nevela was already nevela before Yom Kippur, so that's called a pre-existing prohibition. Rabbi Shimon maintains that the additional prohibition against eating on Yom Kippur does not take effect, and he is thus exempt from the chatos requirement. He doesn't have to bring korban chatos. Furthermore, even where the animal did not die until Yom Kippur, in which case the prohibition against eating on Yom Kippur preceded the prohibition on Nevela. What happened? If Yom Kippur kicked in before,
He becomes nevela after Yom Kippur.
in Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur,
on.
but Yom Kippur came first.
Yes.
The Yom Kippur prohibition is prevented from taking effect by the pre-existing prohibition of Eiver Min HaChai, the prohibition to eat a limb of a living creature. So Rav Sheshes then explained that the Braita, according to Rabbi Shimon, the Chametz prohibition cannot possibly take effect upon the grain already forbidden as tevel, and therefore such a grain cannot produce val matzah.
So it's what comes first, not the more strict prohibition. What is worse, to eat nevela or to eat in Yom Kippur? Should be eating on Yom Kippur.
But it doesn't go by what's worse
Yeah.
and what's not. The Chametz prohibition cannot possibly take effect upon grain already forbidden in a tevel. It's like what is worse, tevel or eating chametz? Eating tevel or eating chametz? But it seems he says that the chametz prohibition cannot possibly take effect upon grain already forbidden in a tevel, and therefore such grain cannot produce val matzah. But that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. See, I don't think everyone would agree with him on this one. Yeah, Buchim to you.